Well, welcome everyone to another NAMI at Noon. I'm Amy Brundle, the Marketing Communications Manager at NAMI North Carolina, and we are pleased to have everyone here for this month's webinar. First of all, as always, we'd like to thank the North Carolina Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services for their support of today's webinar. A couple of housekeeping items as we get started today. If you have any questions for today's speaker, please feel free to use the chat function or the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we will get to those as time allows at the end of the session. We'll also be sending out any materials that the speaker provides us later in the week. You should have all of that by Friday. And now we'd like to welcome today's speaker, Captain Garret Biss. Garret Biss is a retired Marine Corps pilot. Post-retirement in 2015, he confronted some challenges common among veterans: anxiety, depression, and a sense of displacement. Turning to alcohol as a crutch, it wasn't until suicidal ideation took hold that he sought change. Rather than traditional addiction treatments, Garrett's path was shaped by mentoring that emphasized self-worth, rediscovering identity, and tapping into inherent strengths. In 2017, he co-founded an addiction recovery residence in North Carolina and designed the positivity-focused and strength-based programming and curriculum, which are deeply rooted in positive psychology and the principles of human flourishing. He is a TEDx speaker known for the insight into unspoken trauma of military transition. He's also a professional recovery coach that works exclusively with military veterans. Welcome, Garret.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited about this, and thanks for the introduction. Next time I'll send my shorter bio, but thanks for everything that you shared. So it's a real honor to be here, and I'm just excited to share something that I love talking about with anybody who's willing to listen. So I love this opportunity, and I appreciate it. So let's jump in. So today we're going to be looking at understanding veterans and looking at some unique factors that contribute to substance use disorder, mental health challenges, and for many cases, unfortunately, thoughts of or acts of self-harm or suicide. Make sure my clicker's on the right page, and there we go. All right, so why this presentation? So it's currently 18.8 million veterans in America, so about 7.5% of the adult population. And every year, there's 200 to 250,000 more veterans that transition out of active duty service. Veterans as a population are 200% greater risk for substance use disorder and 57% greater risk for suicide. Unfortunately, that number is growing. We're all familiar with the number of the 22 a day, but one recent report said as high as 44 veterans a day were losing their lives either to self-inflicted intentional wounds or through accidental either deaths by overdose or by just high risk behaviors that they were doing in order to deal with some challenges they were facing. Transition brings new threats. So just that transition from military service brings some new threats that many veterans have to face, unfortunately, when they get out. And if we can consider all this, we'll learn how to better serve those who have served. So with that, I would love to know if anybody wants to drop in the chat. I'd love to know who is in the room exactly. So if you are a veteran, you can either use the name, the number, or you can post what you are or why you showed up. If you're a veteran, if you're a loved one, if you work with veterans, or if there's just something specific that you're looking to get from this presentation. And if there is, I'd love to hear what that is to make sure that I cover it. And Amy, I'll continue on. If anything comes up in the chat, you can just share with me what you're seeing, especially if there's specific questions or topics of interest. So what we'll jump into, what you learned today, you gain some new insights into why veterans struggle at the rates that they do with the mental health challenges and substance use disorder. Look at some contributing factors for addiction amongst veterans. And then specifically, we'll look into or zoom into why that transition from military service itself is such a critical time. And ultimately, I'll provide you some tools that you can use, either share them with friends, colleagues, anybody you're working with, or use them yourself if you feel so inclined. I got a couple ground rules for the presentation. For one, I have an agenda-ish. So I have, I come with ideas of what I'd like to share, but I always trust that if there's certain comments or concerns or requests from the audience that we come together for a reason. And I trust that whatever is coming up in the room or in the group is something that we should dive into. So if there is something that you'd like to bring up, then please do it. Anything that I share, by all means, use it. Use it in your work, use it for yourself, use it with anybody, share it with anybody. If there's any reason that you'd like to reach out or any way that I can serve you or continue to work with you, or if you have any ideas or want to ask any questions, by all means, please do reach out. You'll see my email address on most of the slides. And towards the end, there's a link or a place you can find me on LinkedIn if you'd like to do that. Or you can come to the conference in a couple of weeks and I'll see you there as well. All right. So, this is a little bit of this was mentioned. I'm a certified professional recovery coach, human potential trainer, founder and director of a male addiction recovery residence here in Eastern North Carolina, developer of a program. It's called Valiant Path, which infuses applied positive psychology and many coaching tools that have been very effective for me, brings them together in a way to introduce them to or empower veterans. Also, a workbook that I've done. So, one of the many things I put out is a very short book. So, if any of this sounds intriguing to you, or you want to learn more, this is a great place to start. It's called First Steps to Thriving in Recovery. It's a very short workbook, but it offers some applied positive psychology influenced tools to help individuals. It's been popular with clinicians, also been used in, by many sponsors, by recovery coaches, used in SAOP as a curriculum for some time. So, if there's interest, you can find that. What I'd like you to do before we move forward, if you got some place to jot this down, write down these three words. The first is connection, authenticity, and meaning. You can jot it at the top of your page or anywhere in your notes. And if you're driving or you can't do so otherwise, you can make a mental note and we'll come back to it. All right, so we're going to zoom back a little bit and look at a couple of things from a bigger picture, from more of a human perspective. So I understand that we as humans, as individuals, we have some basic fundamental needs for our emotional well-being, really for our ability to thrive or to function well. And these are basic needs that we have beyond our basic human needs for food, water, and shelter. We have some specific needs. The first and foremost is a need for connection. So we are social creatures. We do our best when we're part of a group. We need and require connection in order to feel safe and feel a sense of security. We also need it to help us with emotional regulation. There's things that are hardwired into our body, into our brain that promote social connection or connection with others. When you think about the mirror neuron function that we have in our brain, that really helps us feel the emotions, good or bad, of those that we're surrounded by. We look at some of the things that we do to deal with stress that is built up, whether it's sharing an experience with another, whether it's hugging, whether it's doing anything with a group that promotes a release of oxytocin. That's a very powerful way to overcome some of the negative effects of the stress hormones that have built up in our body. So not only is it a nice thing to have and we feel good when we're around people, but it's really a vital thing for our safety, our sense of security, and our emotional regulation. And then recently, I'm sure you saw the Surgeon General's recent report that came out, which highlighted some of the challenges uh, with loneliness or lack of connection. And what they find is that strong sense of connection can help reduce feelings or symptoms of depression or anxiety. And there was even one study I read recently that said that a lack of proper social connection has the same or similar adverse effects on our health as smoking 15 cigarettes or drinking more than 6 alcoholic beverages each day. So that really drives home to me how important this need for connection is. The lack of proper social connection has devastating effects, or can have devastating effects on our mental and physiological health. And there's so many things that we gain from it. So beyond connection, we also have a need for authenticity. And when I think of authenticity, I think if connection is permission to be a part of a tribe, then authenticity is our permission to be a part of that tribe, but show up just how we are, to express what we think, to ask for what we need, to share how we're feeling without fear that it will cost us that connection. And when we have this permission to be authentic, when we can show up as our true selves, and we can express our truth, then this helps us feel secure in our truth, or by expressing who we really are. It helps us feel secure in future connections. So if we can show up just as we are, and for anybody that's been in and maybe met a new friend, started a new job, had a new romantic relationship, maybe you're willing to admit that there were times that maybe you showed up or you hid certain elements of yourself, or drew more attention to some more positive attributes of you as you're trying to make a good first impression. So that while that can be a natural thing to do, what's more beautiful is when we feel that we can be fully expressive of our wants, needs, and desires. Because when we can do that, then it helps us feel secure that those connections that we're forming, those bonds that we're forming, are ones that are going to endure for a long time. It's not something that's fleeting, but it's built on a stronger foundation. When we can be authentic, or when we feel the safe or the permission to be authentic, then this can really affect our esteem and our efficacy. So I understand self-esteem as our estimate of ourself and what we can overcome in the moment, whereas efficacy is more future-looking. It's looks at what our confidence and our ability to overcome unforeseen challenges in the future. If we're showing up authentically, if we have healthy, authentic connections in an authentic way, and this can really help increase or affect that esteem and efficacy. So let's take a step back for a second. And for anybody that's watching this, I'm curious. I'd love to see a show of hands, but I can't see your hands right now. But I'd love to see how many people know what this is. So very popular. This is a simplified diagram or version, but what this represents is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And in general, the theory is speaker's connection is bad or my connection is bad. I don't know, Amy, if there's any issue with my connection, let me know. So the general theory behind the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that we tend to fulfill or satiate lower level needs before we'll worry about or try to satiate higher level needs. So looking at this diagram, we can see that physiological needs and safety needs are most important from this perspective, and then higher level needs like belonging, esteem, and self-actualization are a little bit higher. Well, I noticed one thing when I was looking at this diagram, that if we think about connection and we think about authenticity, I can see that our needs for connection, to be a part of a tribe, to be part of a group, really are heavily influencing these safety needs. So the benefits that we get from strong social connections satiates or fulfills these lower level needs. And if I think about authenticity, to me that relates more with these higher levels on the pyramid when it's considering belonging, belongingness, love needs, esteem needs, and self-actualization. So the theory says that we won't try to satiate or fulfill higher level needs until lower level needs are met. So I want you to imagine, could there be a situation or an experience where you might have to choose between attaining that connection or attaining or being your authentic self? Now, if we think about this in context of this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then well, the conclusion I come to is that if I was in that situation, and many times that I've been in that situation, I would behave in a way or act in a way that would promote the sense of connection because it satiates or it's more important to satiate that need. So what does that look like, or what happens is if we are hiding our authenticity, then this means that we're hiding parts of ourselves behind a mask. We're showing up as a version of ourselves in order to maintain or gain that level of connection. The challenge is when we hide our authentic self, this can, for one, promotes fear and shame. So if we're hiding a part of ourselves in order to get connection, then we're also telling ourselves or sending ourselves a message that there's something wrong with me just the way that I am, and therefore I should show up as a version of myself in order to receive that connection. It also dilutes the full benefits of that connection. So if we gain connection for that safety and that security and that sense of well-being, if we're doing it and we're not being as an inauthentic version of ourselves or hiding parts of us behind a mask, then it brings about a sense of connection with a fear that what happens if they find out what I'm hiding or something that's true about me, whether maybe I'm hiding something about my past, hiding something about my true desires, beliefs. What happens if they find out the truth? So that can really be limiting. And then if we're promoting or if we're feeding ourselves this idea that there's something wrong with us the way that we are, therefore, we can't get that connection if we show up as we truly are, then this can affect the way that we feel about ourselves, that esteem, the efficacy. And if it affects that, then it can limit our receiving of love. If we're constantly hearing this message or feeling this message that there's something wrong with me as I am, then this can affect the way that we feel about ourselves. And one thing that I've heard and understood and have experienced in my life is that the limit of the amount of love and acceptance that we can receive is kind of limited by the love and acceptance that we have for ourselves. So I love this beach ball analogy. So if we have a part of our truth, so anybody that's ever been to a beach or a pool and you've taken a beach ball and you try to hold it underwater for a period of time, maybe you can get it down there for a second or a few seconds, but very quickly your muscles will become tired, your body will become fatigued, and that beach ball is going to be fighting to the surface. And long enough, you wait long enough, it's going to overcome your ability to push it down. So I think of this as analogous to us trying to push down or hide parts of ourselves. So there could be things that we feel that we need to hide. There could be parts of us that we don't feel are appropriate to present, or we feel if we people knew it about us that it would affect or limit the connections that we have. Well, while doing that, while holding down parts of our truth, it's going to, it does have consequences. For anybody that's ever felt any of these things, either I've worked with people, I've felt this way in my life sometimes as well, but either unfulfilled, sometimes not knowing what we want. Yeah, somebody what they want to do, where they want to go to dinner, what they'd like to do for their career, and not knowing. This feeling that something is missing, but not being able to pinpoint what it is, having a loss of a sense of meaning in life, or the things that you're doing don't provide that sense of meaning that they once did. Feeling alone. So if being in a situation, being crowded in a crowded room, but feeling alone, feeling that sense of loneliness, even though you're surrounded by other people. You increase the sense of stress, fear, disconnection, illness, disease, many consequences of trying to foster connections, but not having that permission or showing up authentically. So the last fundamental human need I'm going to discuss real quickly is this need for meaning. So we're meaning seeking individuals. When something happens, we like to know why it's happening or have some clear indication as to what's going on, whether it's, it could be anything in our life, anything that we observe, we like to tie or have an understanding or a sense of meaning associated with it. We're also meaning seeking creatures in that we seek something to provide a sense of meaning because it can give us that sense of purpose or direction in our life or in the things that we're engaged in. If we have a strong sense of meaning, it can fill an existential void. So if we feel that we're kind of drifting, or we don't have a clear sense of direction, or things aren't exciting us the way that they do, and it can create this existential crisis or existential void, then a strong sense of meaning is the antidote to that. And one thing I've really come to understand and appreciate recently is that meaning, or a sense of meaning in our life, also is a way to end suffering or to deal with suffering. So I understand that our sense of meaning also provides our capacity to endure hard and challenging times. I love the work of Dr. Viktor Frankl. He says that life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by a lack of meaning and purpose. He further says that in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice. I think back to some of the hard or challenging times that I've been through, and some of the hard and difficult things I've been able to endure, whether that's, an all-nighter caring for a loved one, staying up with my young child because he got sick, or whether it's, from a military context, whether it's the hard training environments or the harsh deployments that we go through over and over. If there's a strong sense of meaning is tied to it or associated with it, then it provides us the capacity to endure that and to get through those times. So now let's take a look at veterans in transition. We'll bring this back to the veterans experience. So we think about connection in the military. So connection is something that is experienced to a degree in the military that is not often found outside of military service. And when I transitioned out from the military, many veterans that I spoke to, they say that they've experienced some kind of void inside. They didn't know what exactly that was, but they knew that something was missing. Something felt different, and they really couldn't identify it. Well, there was an experience I had one evening at a Rotary Club or a Rotary event where it was a networking event in my community. And this during this event, I remember standing in a room full of professionals about my age and all from my community. And I remember them talking about and laughing about and sharing about experiences or topics that I just didn't understand. I knew the words that they were saying, but I didn't understand or gain the appreciation of what was going on. And in that instance, as everybody was engaged in these conversations, even though I was surrounded by a bunch of people, I felt isolated and I felt alone. And this is the first time that I experienced that I thought I really got in touch with this fact that I had lost my sense of belonging. I was surrounded by people and I didn't feel that I'd belonged. And I realized that that sense of belonging that I had in the military was gone, and that sense of belonging might be gone forever. I wasn't sure if it was something that could come back. So when we think about connection in the military, one way that it's expressed is I would run into battle with you by my side. And many times, if it comes to it, I would even trade my life to protect yours. When we think about this, that level of connection, that level of devotion to our brothers and sisters in arms, to the group or the unit that we're a part of, That's a sense of devotion and connection that is very hard, if not impossible, to replace or to experience again outside of the military. So while trying to maintain that or regain that sense of connection, it can challenge a veteran's authenticity or willingness to show up. I remember many times finding very quickly that there were certain things about me, whether it was my sense of humor, whether it was the level of intensity that I brought to work. When you think about veterans, we're trained to see everything through the lens of life or death. And that's a level of intensity that doesn't really translate well off base. So they very quickly, as veterans transition out, they sense and they know that there's something that's different about them. And when that starts to challenge our sense of connection and we realize that we've lost that sense of belonging, then many times we can feel this tendency to start hiding parts of us. Maybe it's hiding that sense of humor, hiding some of the things that we're thinking about, some of the things that we're worrying about, some of the needs that we have that aren't being met. We want to hide that because we don't want to appear or seem different. We want to be able to maintain the connection or gain new connections. And we know that if we're seen differently, then this can be a challenge. There was one evening I was at a party soon after I got out. And I remember we were in a condo or an apartment, and we are on the second or third floor. And I remember standing in this apartment by a sliding door out to a patio, and it brought up that somebody brought up the fact that that veterans can be very have a very high sense of alert, um, constantly be thinking about threats. And I remember telling them, my experience as being at this party and trying to enjoy a good time, trying to have conversations, trying to meet new people, that from my perspective, standing on that in that apartment, I knew where every entrance was into that room. I knew where there was rooms in that apartment that I didn't know what was behind the closed door. I knew that from the balcony that could be a potential way to escape if there was a threat. And I knew while looking around me certain what we call weapons of opportunity or things that I might be able to leverage if a threat were to come into that room and I had to, deal with the fight or flight response. So as I shared this, thinking that maybe they would find it interesting or they seemed to find it interesting, I quickly saw that their perception of me and their behavior towards me or around me seemed to change. And I realized that as I shared my truth and what my experience was like, that this level of intensity was something that wasn't comfortable to them. So I quickly learned from that experience and other similar ones that there was things about myself or about my experience that I would need to hide or I would need to keep to myself if I wanted to experience the connections or experience the sense of belonging or feel like I was brought into a sense of belonging. I love this quote by Rita Mae Brown, the author. She wrote that the reward for conformity was that everyone liked you except for yourself. So as you're doing things, as you're hiding things, trying to conform to those that you're around, the effect that it has is that you may gain the appreciation or the acceptance of those around you, but you lose it. The cost is you lose that acceptance and that appreciation from yourself. Thirdly, let's look at the sense of meaning. So, meaning, that thing that can provide our capacity to endure hard times and endure suffering. They say that a true warrior doesn't go into battle because they hate what's in front of them. They fight because of how much they love what's behind them. So when we think about that sense of meaning, many individuals that join the military, they do so from a sense of calling. They feel called into the service, not for many other reasons than they want to be a part of something that's greater than themselves. They want to serve the family, their loved ones. They want to serve something that make a difference, make an impact. And when you depart the military, it's hard to find anything that replaces that sense of meaning, that replaces that calling. Many of the things that you engage in, a lot of the veterans that I speak with, they say the things that they're engaged in, they just feel they don't feel important. They feel kind of menial. They feel like they're being underutilized. That's a big part of it, that they feel like they gained all these skills and had all these experiences that make them somebody that can do amazing things, but they can't find a job that really requires all of the capacity that they have to offer. And as a result, they feel like they've lost their sense of meaning, and therefore they've lost a lot of that capacity to deal with hard times. As Viktor Frankl said, life is never made unbearable by circumstance, but only by a lack of meaning and purpose. Well, the truth is, hard times are going to continue to come. That's part of life, that we always have ups and downs, that we have challenges, that we have obstacles that we have to overcome. Well, facing those hard times can create some uncomfortable situations, and it requires us to lean into things that are uncomfortable and to experience some, make some sacrifices and feel hard times. If you've lost that sense of meaning and you've lost a part of that capacity that allows you to face and overcome those difficult and hard times, then that leads to the exacerbation of the challenges of regular daily life. And this is the number one thing that I think really contributes to the the increased rates of addiction and suicide and mental health challenges that veterans face. So if we look at a veteran who's in transition, they've lost that sense of connection that they're familiar with. If they try to gain new sense of connections, they can lose a feeling of their authenticity if they're hiding parts of them to be accepted or to show up and try to regain that connection and lost that sense of meaning. So losing all three of these in transition, in an instant, not prepared for it, in the instant you take off the uniform, creates creates a lot of challenges. So I'm going to step back real fast, and I want to talk about this concept of trauma. So it's what I can share in about a minute. So I know that you could fill libraries and everything to talk about what trauma is, what it's not, how it manifests, how to deal with it. But basically, from a layperson's term, from a non-clinical understanding, whenever somebody asks me what trauma is, I explain it typically as first and foremost, it's something that's individually defined. So two people can experience the same thing. It could be traumatic for one, not traumatic for the other. At a root or at the foundation of it, some prior assumption is shattered. So I understand that trauma is any experience or circumstance, situation that a person that encounters that changes a fundamental value, belief, or understanding about the world or their place in it. So, for example, if a person was in a car accident and they lost a loved one next to them, well, they lived in a world up until that point where they could generally get into a car, they could drive around, they could go to the store, they could travel, and they wouldn't have to worry about something horrific happening. That's the belief, that's the understanding that they had of how the world operated. Well, after that moment, if it becomes a traumatic experience for that individual, they realize that this fundamental belief that they had that you could generally get in a car and drive around and be safe and expect to arrive safely at your destination, that belief's not true. That sometimes you get in a car and horrible things happen. So what I understand some of the struggle with trauma or the as we move forward is that the challenge comes back to a fundamental belief or value that was changed that does two things. One, it's hard to reconcile this world that we used to live in with this new world or this new version of reality that we're experiencing. And it can also make us question other fundamental beliefs that we have. If this one belief that we have was proven to not be true, then what are the other beliefs that I have that are also not true? And as we do this, the differentiator between what something is traumatic and what something is just stressful is that if something is traumatic, then by definition, there's not just a return to baseline. It's not a stressful experience that you overcome and you come back to the same version of yourself and your life experience as before, but there's a change or there's not a return to baseline. For many individuals, they have an altered view of the world. So as I said, there's a change in a belief about how they understand themselves or the world. For many, there can be an altered view of self. So people that were in a traumatic experience where they realized that maybe they were not as capable or not able to overcome certain challenges, that can create an altered view of self, what you're worth, what you're capable of, and fundamentally a change in values or beliefs from the experience. So this isn't just a crack in a foundation. It's not just a shifting of the foundation, but for many individuals, it can be a complete loss of or crumbling of that foundation. For those who have gone through it, and I'll share from kind of my personal experience, that you may experience it as, if they've lived through a traumatic experience, can experience it as one, the world's not safe as I am. Maybe they've lost a sense of connection and they've come to this conclusion that there's things in the world that are not safe, or maybe there's circumstances or environments where they are not safe just as they are. They still need acceptance, they still need connection, they still need that sense of meaning. And sometimes or too often, individuals will start to exchange their authenticity. They'll hide parts of themselves so they can regain that sense of connection or any connection that was lost. And we see this often with individuals that are struggling with substance use disorder for a period of time, is that they find new meaning in avoiding the pain. So if they've found a substance or a behavior or an activity that helps them avoid, numb, or escape a situation in their life that they can't handle, then their new meaning can be just in trying to avoid that pain as it comes up, which is the continuous or accelerated pursuit of a substance or behavior to deal with life. All right, so one more topic, and then I'll tie these two together. So, what's the connection between veterans and addiction? So I think of, one of the reasons I started talking about this and I share about this so often is I saw this perception that there's this thought of veterans that struggle, whether it's mental health challenges or addiction, and this thought or this idea that there must be a correlation to PTSD. And for many individuals, as I talked to them, when their understanding was that the post-traumatic stress disorder would have to have come from or likely came from an experience on the battlefield. So maybe some Saving Private Ryan type scene, maybe an explosion on the battlefield, maybe a situation that they faced in training, maybe a sexual assault that they experienced. And while that's true, that can certainly be true, and unfortunately, it's true for a lot of veterans. That's not true for all. And the challenge with this understanding or this thought that, there has to be this, one of a few horrific instances that leads to this challenge with the post-traumatic stress, PTSD, um, it leaves a lot of veterans that I've talked to that are struggling with or exhibiting, maybe they've been diagnosed or they're exhibiting symptoms of PTSD, but they don't have a specific instance on a battlefield or in training or a specific assault that happened that led to that. And this is the situation that I was in. So as I was challenged with and dealing with a lot of these symptoms that were coming up, I look back on my military career and I couldn't think of, yeah, of course there were some very stressful times. There were some horrific things that I experienced, but I couldn't identify one thing or a few things that I felt contributed to the mental health challenges that I was facing. So this left me really kind of wondering, and this led me on this path to looking at and to understanding that transition itself, regardless of what a veteran experiences while they're in the military, that transition from military service itself, the loss of connection, the loss of authenticity, and the loss of meaning can create that fundamental shift in values, beliefs, or understanding that leads somebody to, that is the traumatic experience for them. So the correlation to addiction, I love this definition by Dr. Gabor Mate, and I love a lot of what he has shared and kind of influenced my understanding of addiction and more importantly, recovery. But a very broad and general definition of addiction, he says addiction is manifest in any behavior that a person craves, finds temporary relief or pleasure in, but suffers a negative consequence as a result of, and yet has difficulty giving it up. One of the things I love most about this definition is it helps me see it's that focus on any behavior. So it helps me see that addiction is not something that manifests, or substance use disorder is not something that manifests in this kind of arbitrarily selected short list of substances or behaviors that we often think of. But addiction can manifest in any behavior that a person craves. So somebody that has any avoidant behavior or any activity that they continue to indulge in or rely on to relieve that sense of pain or relieve that discomfort, and it provides a negative consequence, then this is a manifestation of addiction. For some individuals, it's a substance that they pick up. It becomes an over reliance on alcohol or any other substance that they've indulged in or engaged in. For other individuals, it becomes workaholism. It might be Netflix binging. We look at the prevalence now of social media addiction and internet addictions, gambling addiction. All of these things are behaviors, and if it creates a negative consequence in your life, even if it's more socially acceptable, even if it's something, a lot of people don't have the same stigmatizing thoughts around somebody who goes home and Netflix binges or video games, plays video games all the time as they do on these other, some other substance or behavior they might be involved in. But to me, from my perspective, it's all the same because if it creates a negative consequence in your life, maybe it's affecting your health, it's affecting your education, it's affecting your relationships, it's affecting your ability to get promoted or to feel good just kind of in your own skin, then that's something then the similarity there is obvious to me, and it's something that we should support individuals that are going through that and help them get to a better place. The other thing I love about Dr. Gabor Mate's work is he offers this question. It says when we think about or when we ask the question, why the addiction? So if we think about why does somebody continue to go back to a certain substance or behavior, even after they've had drastic consequences, why does Joe continue to drink and drive after he's had a couple DWIs, or why does Sally on her third marriage continue to indulge in this addiction? When we ask these questions, it's not as easy to now. Working in the field, I think we have a little bit more insight, but it's not as easy to answer this question. It can lead us to a frustrating place. What Dr. Gabor Mate recommends is instead of asking the question, why the addiction, then ask the question, why the pain? So this can help lead us to a much clearer understanding of what's going on. If somebody is engaged in a behavior that provides temporary relief of pain, then why the pain? And to me, there's one statement that really kind of alludes to this or summarizes this. There was a famous TEDx talk by Johann Hari, and he says the opposite of addiction is connection. So from awareness to action, okay, so now with this understanding, with what we've talked about, what does this help out with? So what can veterans do? First and foremost, veterans regaining a sense of connection. What I've found and what I've encouraged and helped other veterans through is if we want to regain a sense of connection with others, we first and foremost need to regain a sense of connection with ourself. And a very simple tool, a beautiful way to do this is as our mind gets spooled up or begins to wander, one thing I've found is coming back to and reconnecting with the breath. Whether that's through diaphragmatic breathing, whether it's through box breathing, or many of the forms of breath work that are now becoming more popular. When we can connect with our breath, one of the benefits that I found is that if I'm triggered, or if an individual is triggered and they're in that fight or flight state, what I found is that I can't think my way out of that fight or flight state. I can't tell my prefrontal cortex, okay, come on, come back online. Let's think through this. Let's assess the situation and let's find a plan to kind of move through this. But what I can do is I can communicate with my brain and the parts of my brain through my breath. And what I've learned is that the breath is really a closed loop communication system. So as we get triggered, our body will change in its activity, and it will typically elongate our inhale and shorten our exhale as a way to prepare us to fight or flee. And what I found is that even when I am triggered, I can control my breath, and I can use my breath to communicate to my brain that we can calm down. And that's the benefit of the beauty behind diaphragmatic breathing is by manipulating our breath, we can communicate with our brain and we can calm ourselves down. So that's one kind of benefit. Another thing that we can do is focus on the wins and successes that we've had in our life. So it's common as we've gone through challenging times or if we're really struggling in life to think about all of the negative things about us or the negative things in our life that seem to be piling up. And I think our mind does that naturally as a self-protective measure. So if we've made some mistakes in the past, it's going to kind of keep those tabs open, if you will, in our conscious mind or in our thoughts, ruminating over things that we've done negatively as a way to protect us from doing those things again. Because if we make a mistake and we continue that mistake, then that can create negative consequences in our life. Unfortunately, this also means that anytime we do something good or we have a win or something that we can celebrate or we've demonstrated one of our strengths, because that behavior is not going to be a future threat to us, we tend to discount that or forget about it very quickly. That said, with intention, we can regain our focus or bring our focus back to wins and strengths that we've had, and that's something I found extremely effective and powerful in serving individuals through their journey in recovery. So by reconnecting with ourselves, by regaining our sense of self-worth, our self-esteem, our self-efficacy, this can prepare us to regain a sense of connection when those connections are available. And one thing that I found is that focusing on similarities. So whether you're trying to reconnect with veterans that it served in a different branch of service or in a different time, a different wartime or a different era, focusing on the similarities that we have with the experiences and who we are as individuals, not focusing on the differences. So one thing as I came out of the military and I realized that I was losing all those connections that I had, and I thought of, the VFW and the DAV and all these service organizations. My thought was, oh, it's just a bunch of old guys that get together and drink beers and tell war stories from a war that I never experienced, from an era that I'm not from. And it really turned me off to this idea of trying to connect with other veterans that way. I didn't really see myself necessarily as a veteran yet. I was still thinking about and seeing myself as somebody who was on active duty. That said, what I've come to find is that regardless of when somebody served or regardless of what branch of service, there's so many similarities between veterans that you can't overstate the benefit of connecting with other veterans. There's many ways to do that now. Fortunately, that's one of the silver linings of the benefits of social media is it gives us the opportunity to connect with individuals, not just in our community, but really anywhere in the community. There's also a lot of social groups and a lot of veteran-only 12-step groups. So for individuals that are working the steps, so they want that kind of community support and going through their journey, then there's opportunities there, and that's another kind of silver lining, I guess, from technology and the internet. The one word of advice that I always share is be the friend. So I think back to the advice, the adage from Mahatma Gandhi. He says, "Be the change that you want to see in the world." And I also remember this quote by Zig Ziglar, who said, if you go out in the world seeking friends, you won't find them anywhere. If you go out in the world first trying to be a friend, then you'll find them in abundance. Well, I think about that as we're trying to regain connections. Instead of thinking about the connections that we want or what we're expecting from other individuals, if we just demonstrate that level of connection that we want, if we demonstrate our willingness to show up in bad times and be there for somebody when they're going through a rough patch, then very quickly we'll start to find and regain those sense of connections in our life. Authenticity, when we want to lean into and start to express our authenticity more, first and foremost is knowing ourselves. So taking an inventory, looking at what are those things that we, in this new capacity as a veteran, so this new version of ourselves, what are the things that we want? What are the things that we need? What do we enjoy? One of the downsides of military service is you don't have a lot of autonomy to do things that you enjoy or engage in things, travel to places that you want to do hobbies that you want to do. So now there's a new opportunity, but it requires some intention to get clear on what are these things and what means kind of the most to us. What are the things that we enjoy? What do we want more of in our life? And more, and almost as importantly, or what are the things that we're hiding? What are the elements of us that we naturally or instinctively almost began to hide? What are the fears that we have about why are we hiding it? So my example at that party, and I started to hide things about how I thought and how I felt. It was because I feared that I would lose connection, and as a consequence, it cost me some connections. Maybe there were people that rightfully wouldn't want to maintain or invest in that connection with me, but there's probably likely other people that had I continued to express myself authentically, I could have had the opportunity for a stronger bond or a stronger connection with them. So as veterans, I always recommend veterans accept and celebrate the differences that they have, acknowledge the benefits, the skills, the strengths that they gained from military service and celebrate those and begin to share that truth. Find your new truth, find what you are as a veteran, find the things that have changed about you or the things that are true that you weren't in touch with for a period of time while you're in the service. So finding that and then expressing that. And as we do that, the comfort with doing so will continue to grow with time. And as we do it, a great benefit that we get from that is that it emboldens our emotional resilience. So the more secure that we are in ourselves, the more secure we are with who we are, the greater sense of emotional resilience we have. We're not so reliant on the behaviors or the reactions or the acceptance of others outside of us. Lastly, for the sense of meaning, to regain that sense of meaning, my advice or what I encourage is being intentional with joy. So I understand that joy is a really powerful emotion. It can be a guiding star in our life. What I have found and what I believe is that when we engage in things that bring about that emotion of joy, this can be an indicator to or a guiding star towards those places where we'll find the greatest sense of meaning. So what are the times that we feel most alive? Who are we with? Where are we? What are we doing? And if we follow that sense of joy, it can bring about or it can point us in that direction of regaining that sense of meaning or regaining that sense of purpose. For a lot of veterans, they were called into the military because they felt called to serving something greater than themselves. So fortunately, there's a lot of organizations out there where you can find new ways to serve. If being of service or serving others is something that's true and very important to you, then I encourage you to lean into that. And there's organizations like Veterans Without Orders who empowers veterans to go off and serve communities around the world, leveraging some of the skills and the talents and the character traits that veterans have developed and applying those or continuing to apply those moving forward. Team Rubicon's another organization, and there's many others that kind of leverage the skills and the talents that veterans have and engage them in meaningful ways so they can regain that sense of meaning or purpose. One, let's see, my slides aren't going. Anything advancing on your side, Amy? Looks frozen on mine.
No, I'm afraid not.
All right. Oh,
Now I see a slide of a door.
okay. Well, I'll just go with that then, and we'll come back to there's a couple of resources I want to share, but for one, I really appreciate everybody being here. I do want to offer some time for any questions and Q&A. I do have some resources to share, so certainly hang out, and I'll share those with you in any way that we can get connected. So really, where my journey started in my transition. So A couple of years ago, I was enjoying a visit from a good friend of mine. So it was the end of a long weekend, and my buddy Ed had come for a visit. We hadn't seen each other in almost a year, so it was a great chance to catch up. And it was also, honestly, a welcome distraction to everything that was on my mind. I was facing a divorce, I was dealing with some health and financial challenges. But hardest of all, my separation from the Marine Corps was stripping away the identity that I'd known my entire adult life. I'd given everything to the Marines, but without that uniform, now I didn't even know who I was. And I felt that the life that I was left with as a veteran was falling apart. Before he left, I said, "Hey, can you do me a favor? If you go into my bedroom closet and you reach up on the shelf, you'll find a box with my pistol and some bullets in it. Would you mind taking that with you when you go?" I didn't tell Ed while I was asking this favor, but the truth is, I just no longer trusted myself to be home alone with my gun. This weapon that provided me a sense of security when I was in the Marines was now the thing that I feared the most. I didn't think I'd kill myself that day or that week, but the thoughts were becoming more pervasive. I knew at that point that an estimated 22 veterans were taking their lives every single day, and I couldn't tell how close I was to crossing that line. As a population, veterans are twice as likely to suffer from mental health challenges or struggle with addiction. Veterans are at least 57% more likely to commit suicide. And now, as a veteran that was struggling with anxiety, with panic attacks, and depression, I'd become a part of those statistics, and I needed to figure out why. Fortunately, during the next few years, I found a path out of that darkness. And through that journey, I began to understand why so many veterans suffer the way they do when they leave the military. What became clear to me was that the struggles that we face often stem from deeper unmet needs. In this case, the human needs for connection, authenticity, and meaning. I'm sharing what I am today because I discovered, or what I've discovered, to help provide that hope and encouragement to other veterans who find themselves in the darkness, and also help family members and friends better understand that suffering so they can better support the veterans that we all love. And the encouragement that I leave veterans with is that the path that I took out of that dark place and the path that a lot of other veterans are encouraged to take is, for one, be the connection. So be the connection that you want to experience. Show up as that version of yourself or show up as that friend that you want to experience in your life. The next is seek or express your truth. So leverage those strengths and the traits and the skills that you developed in the military and lean into them. Express that with the work that you're doing. Express that in the friendships that you have and what you're developing. And if you've lost your sense of meaning, then seek more joy in your life. So what we've talked about today is about connection, authenticity, and meaning. And we've looked at it through a lens of these fundamental human needs, through the lens of somebody who's transitioned from military service. And if you have that place on your notes, if you jotted down these 3 words, and I'd like you to go back and I ask you that if you learned something new or gained some new insight about either of these, connection, authenticity, or meaning, then go ahead and throw a check mark next to that word. And if you gain some awareness or you gain something that will help you in your service, either as a veteran yourself or as a professional that works with veterans, then draw another check mark. And if you got less than 5 check marks, then I want you to see me after class and we can answer any questions that you might have or go through anything. For right now, if you have a phone with you and you're watching this on a computer, then you can pull out your phone. I've got a couple things to share. First are a couple books of further reading if you're interested. These are a couple that I've read recently that have kind of influenced my understanding in this presentation. But Lost Connections by Johann Hari. That's the TEDx or the TED speaker that I mentioned before. The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. The Myth of Normal and Tribe on Becoming and Belonging. And I'll be sharing these slides. So if you need to come back, then you'll have them to check them out. Recently did a TEDx talking about this topic. So it's maybe a 10-ish minute version of this presentation. If this is something that you're interested in or you want to share this with anybody, then please do. You can hit that QR code, or you can go to a website called unspokentrauma.vet. That's a way that you can get access to that. And lastly, if you'd love to connect on LinkedIn, you can either search for my name on LinkedIn or use this QR code. I'd love to connect with you, and it's a great way for us to message if there's anything that I can provide to you or any way I can support you. I'd love to do it. And because you're such a special audience and group, I'll go ahead and let's see, let's pause it again. All right. Well, message me through LinkedIn if you want to get connected, and we'll get something on the calendar. The last slide that I have is just for questions and sharings. I'd love to hear anything that you gain from this, any questions that you have, anything that you'd like to share. I'd love to hear it.
Garrett, thank you so much. We had a couple of people chime in about why they joined us today. We have one who mentions that he was a military brat as a child.
Mm.
Same. Now a mental health therapist who works with veterans. We have a couple of other folks who are providers who work with veterans. And then we've also got several family members of veterans, including my son is active duty. My husband is a veteran in recovery. We had another person who said that they are the daughter and the mother of somebody who is a veteran. Um, we've just gotten a message with somebody who is 12 years in recovery themselves, and is paying it forward in graduate school for rehabilitation counseling. So another person who
Love
kind
that.
of learned from their own experiences and decided to help others. Uh,
Wonderful.
one of the questions that we received, what is the chance that veterans benefits will cover mental health treatment outside of the VA? Since one of the struggles that veterans can face is a lack of options.
Yeah, so one thing that's come out, and I'm drawing a blank on what this recent legislation was, but what I've learned is that any veteran, if you're having a mental health crisis, you can go into any treatment provider, any hospital, any facility, and you can get mental health care, and the VA will cover it. So if you know somebody and they're far away from a VA facility, they can go and if they're in a bad situation, if they're experiencing an emergency, then they can go into any place and receive mental health care. For many veterans that are in the VA healthcare system, they are becoming it's getting much easier to be referred to places out in town. So the closest place that I have for a VA facility to me is in Greenville. It's like 51 miles away or 52 miles away. So I just requested and they put a care in the community referral out, and I was able to see and connect with somebody in my town. So that's becoming a lot easier to do.
Great, thank you. I think this presentation is an excellent way for helping us to just kind of understand the basics of why veterans are going through the issues that they're going through. Do you have some practical suggestions for what family members, spouses, friends can kind of do to show their support in a tangible way?
Certainly. So, for anybody that wants to learn a little bit more, one thing that you can do, and the reason I put that TEDx out in April is because I wanted a quick way for people to have a little bit better understanding or a little glimpse into the journeys that a lot of veterans are taking. And what I highly encourage for anybody that has or loves it or knows a veteran that they love and they want to be there to support them, then do so as much as you can without just be an open ear. Just listen to them and be, careful about passing it seeming to pass any judgment on anything that they're sharing. There's probably some things that they're hiding that they're afraid to share. And if they, and we can gain that comfort with sharing by expressing a little bit, sharing one of our truths and seeing how individuals respond to that. So with as much compassion and understanding as you can muster, using that to connect with and to listen to the stories of any veterans, just giving them permission to share anything that they want or not share anything that they don't want, but just understanding that you love and accept them however they are and however they show up, and if they need anything, that you're there for them.
Yeah, excellent. Well, and to all the veterans on the call, of course, we thank you for your service, and just know that you're not alone. There are resources out there that are determined to help. Garrett's going to send some of the resources that he has with the slides and other links. So when we do share the recording of this session and a feedback survey, we'll make sure and include all of those for everyone who registered.
I'm sorry about the issue with the slides. I don't know what it was. Maybe that was some outside influence telling me which slide to go to next and what to share and what not to share. But everything will be in the slide deck that I send to you. So if you felt you missed anything, you can go and see. I think it was just some slides on different resources. One is called the Warrior Reset. So it's a quick program I put together for any veterans or any warriors that feel stuck, feel like something's missing, feel like they want to make some progress, feel like yeah, just they're not showing up as the best version of themselves. Very easy way. You can just go to thewarriorreset.com and I'll share that too in the follow-up email and you can gain access to that. So it's a 10-day challenge, offers four of the most efficacious and quick, powerful interventions or daily practices that I've come across to really help make a shift in that emotional and mental well-being for individuals.
Quick is good. Well, thank you again for everybody who attended today's webinar. And please note that, we're going to share resources, but I'm also going to put our helpline information in the chat. So if you have any immediate needs, please feel free to reach out to us as well. Again, keep an eye out for an email by the end of the week with some follow-up information, including recording. And our next NAMI at Noon webinar is going to take place in just a couple of weeks. It's November 4th, and we're going to be talking with Melissa Rodriguez from Cornerstone Counseling and Wellness about the interconnection between chronic illness and mental health and what could be done to mitigate some of those complications. So until then, thank you guys so much. Thank you again to Garret Biss. We really appreciate having you. We'll see you at the conference in a couple of weeks
That's
and
right.
hope
I'll be there.
everybody has a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.